I mean, for me, this is the scariest thing in the world, and I'm not a very scared person. Like, I'm not phased by a lot of the other threats that you hear about. I figure we'll find solutions to most of the problems, whether it's natural disasters or food shortages or anything else. But it seems like it goes back to the idea that a democracy depends on a good press that you have, like, people cannot make decisions if they don't have good information. And so I guess the one thing that I spend a lot of time poking at is, if we were I do believe that we have a lot of power in mass as people in the world still. If we were all just to walk out in the street and march on Washington about, or whatever, about one thing regarding this in order to clean up and make our information clean again, right? What would that look like? Like, what is I mean it's kind of an impossible question. I don't expect you to necessarily have the silver bullet, but what would that first step look like?
I think you're right. I don't have an answer to that question because I think it's so much deeper and more pervasive. One thing that I've been kind of coming to understand viscerally from paying attention to this stuff is how much authoritarianism, authoritarian governments, which we usually imagine as like, this very top down apparatus of the state just controlling everybody and people kind of going along with it out of fear. But how much of authoritarian regimes depend upon the not just the fearful complacency, but the active willingness of the population. Authoritarian regimes thrive where people are fearful of one another, and where people are so distrustful of each other that they not only submit to but demand that the government and other powerful actors come in and and create structures of authority for them. And so, like, I think that this is a really cultural issue. Like, again, I'm Gen X, and when we were growing up, we were known as this like rebellious generation when we were young. And I assumed when I was young that that was just synonymous with being young. If you're young, you're anti-authoritarian, you rebel. Now I'm coming to realize that that's actually probably a projection out of the fact that our parents were boomers and they came up in the 60s. And so they were rebellious when they were young. And then we just kind of associated being young with being rebellious. But like the generations coming out, younger millennials and Zoomers are, I think, quite an authoritarian generation insofar as they're not rebelling against anything. And when they get offended and microaggressed against, they, their first thing that they turn to is they demand that the institutions that they belong to put up more rules, put up more sort of authoritarian structures to protect them. And so, like, I think that that's a turn that American culture is going in which we are, like, a lot of this stuff, when you talk about this disinformation stuff, I feel like 30 years ago, if you talked about government censorship by proxy, people would instantly be like, oh yeah, I'm totally against that, right? But now you have to have a long conversation where people are like, yeah, but what do we do with disinformation? What about the threats of disinformation? And if the government's not going to protect us from that, then who is? And da, da, da. And there is an openness and kind of almost, there's like a lot, people, a lot of folks in the, like, a lot of hardcore Democrats are demanding this stuff. Like, they're insisting on more government censorship. And I think that that's a dark place for the country to be in. I think that it opens up an avenue in which it's not just that powerful opportunistic actors can come in and create an authoritarian structure. It's that literally that political will be coming from demands from below, and the government will meet that demand by, enthusiastically meet that demand. And we could be, a decade away from that. I'm not saying it's inevitable. I'm not saying it's even likely. I'm just saying it's a possibility in a way that I don't think it
No,
has been before, at least in
it
my
seems
lifetime.
very likely, all things, if nothing changes. But that's what I'm curious is, like, what are the ways in which the youth can be inspired to see it, like, to feel like they have the ability to take control of their circumstances in a way that they don't require institutional intervention. Like, if it's a cultural thing, it seems like it's a reaction to some perceived fear or some perceived like impotence towards dealing with those situations.